to everybody. I'm Stefano da Empoli, president of the Institute for Competitiveness. That is one of the 4 think tanks creating PromethEUs, our new network, including also Geo, and you see Oscar Fernandez, Geo, and including also Iobe, and you can see Angelos Tsanakinas, I'm sorry, and also FFMS from Portugal, Geo from Spain, of course, and Iobe from Greece, and the Institute for Competitiveness from Italy. Actually, we want, our objective, of course, is to give a perspective on European issues, digital issues, from Southern Europe. That is something quite unusual on a EU stage. And this is our first conference. Of course, we would have liked to hold a physical conference. We were planning to do a conference at the European Parliament, but of course, plans were redirected to an online version, and hopefully sooner or later we will hold a physical event in Brussels, as well as our member states. And this conference is, of course, on the 2 most relevant digital topics in town, in Brussels, but of course not only in Brussels, AI and DSA, the DSA. On AI, we participated in the consultation. It was our first publication. Then we published also a paper on which our response to the consultation was based, and of course, we are also working, and we will produce, a paper also on DSA after, of course, the publication of the proposal by the Commission. Just few words. Of course, I will limit for a matter of time to set some principles on which our document was based, and you will find it on our website, www.prometheusnetwork.eu. I think already tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. On AI, of course, we hold, a favorable view of the AI white paper, and the fact that it's based and it's targeting, the 2 ecosystems of excellence and trust. And we believe that investments and rules are the 2 pillars of, should be, the 2 pillars of the AI EU strategy. So we totally agree on that. And of course, we greet also the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in the Digital Age set up by the European Parliament, and we are glad to have some of the members today discussing with us AI policies in the EU, AI strategy in the EU. And our contribution, one at least of our main lines of attention was on the fact that we should, of course, strive for excellence in the development of AI technologies. So the EU as a leader in the development of AI technologies, and this is for true a priority. And unfortunately, it's not. We are not exploiting the full potential of human capital in the EU, we believe. But we should also think of AI technologies in terms of adoption. And there are two profiles that, in our opinion, are very important in this respect, in the respect of adoption. The first one is that, I mean, whatever strategy we envisage for, I mean, fostering the excellence of the EU, I mean, in the development of technologies, we should think of adoption in terms of giving access to citizens and companies, especially SMEs, to the best available technologies at a competitive price. So technologies should be affordable, because otherwise, I mean, we would pursue the interest of a few companies. We hope more and more companies selling AI technologies, but not of the rest of companies that need to adopt as soon as possible AI technologies, as well, of course, citizens that will use AI products. And the second aspect that is very important in our opinion is, and where, I mean, there is a focus, an important focus from the European Commission, is upskilling and reskilling. This is a very important task, and especially, of course, speaking from countries that unfortunately are not at the forefront, at least for now, in terms of skills. But I think it's a topic that is very important from any member state in the EU. And regarding the risk-based approach taken by the Commission in the white paper, that, I mean, we totally agree with, we think that we should stress three principles. First one, creating a level playing field between AI products and non-AI products. So we should avoid discriminating against AI products. Second, limiting uncertainty. So we should, for example, limit as much as possible exceptions, not envisaged in the risk-based approach. And third, limiting compliance costs. Of course, for any company, especially SMEs, but I mean, thinking of if we want an uptake of AI technologies, we think that we should, I mean, stress this point of limiting compliance costs. And for the DSA, I mean, just in the few remaining minutes, I'm almost running late. We are certainly in favor of tightening and better enforcing regulation in some areas of digital services. We think that I mean, we should start from, I mean, any regulation should start from a right and comprehensive understanding of the underlying market dynamics, and this is very important, and taking into account possible consequences. And in this respect, it's very important to continue to ensure access to I mean, high-level, high-quality technologies at a not significant price, or in many cases at a for free. And any regulation should be limited to, in our opinion, to specific aspects, and being light-handed in order to favor, continue to favor, and actually increasingly favor innovation and market competition. And finally, we think that I mean, we should think to two areas for regulation that are very important for us. The first one is tackling more than in the past lock-in practices. and this is very important to ensure competition and innovation. And secondly, fairness and transparency should be guaranteed with respect both to consumers and potential competitors and any other third party working in partnering with digital platforms. So this is in very shortly, I mean, the main principles that we support. And on DSA, of course, we will work, but also on AI, we will continue to work. But let me go to the first panel. Actually, Roberto Viola, the Director General of DG Connect of the European Commission, will join us later, and he will speak between the two panels. So we will start now the first panel, and I'm glad to leave the floor to Oscar Fernandez from ESADE.
Thank you very much, Stefano, for this introduction. So my name is Oscar Fernandez, and I'm a senior researcher at ESADE, which, as Stefano already said, is a Spanish think tank that belongs to the PromethEUs network. I'll be moderating today's first panel, which we called The New Way to Artificial Intelligence, Fostering Excellence and Building Trust. And we named this first panel this because it's also the title of the joint paper that Stefano mentioned before, which we published in September, in which we analyzed the Commission's white paper, but also the current AI landscape in Southern Europe, as well as geopolitical implications of the AI race. All of these issues will be covered in this first panel, in which we have a fantastic mix of speakers. Let me first remind the audience that if they have any questions, they can use the Q&A feature, which you will see below on your screen. Or you can also book your intervention there if you want to speak briefly, in which case we'll ask you please to activate the video. So without further ado, let me now introduce all of the panelists. First, we have João Castro from the Nova School of Business and Economics in Portugal. We also have Robert Dehm with us from the Permanent Representation of Germany to the EU. Cinzia Guido from Confindustria, which is the main Italian business federation. Kilian Gross from the European Commission's DG for Communications, Networks, Content and Technology. We have as well with us two MEPs. The first one is Susana Solis, who belongs to the Renew Europe group. And the second one is Edina Toth, also well, she's a member of the European Parliament in the European People's Party group. So thank you very much, all of you, first of all, for joining us. And let me start by giving the word to João Castro. As you know, we're a pretty young initiative, but I would like to think that João is already a longtime friend of ours because he's been to a couple of our events before. For those of you who don't know him, he's an associate professor at Nova School of Business and Economics in Portugal, where he teaches in master and executive programs. He's also academic supervisor of the Digital Experience Lab. And João, I'm going to do with you what I'm going to do with everyone else. I'm going to pose you a question to get your talk going. And the question would be the following. Do you believe that the risk-based system proposed by the Commission in its white paper may hamper SMEs' incentives to invest in AI or innovation prospects? So João, let us hear from you about that. The floor is yours when you're ready. Thank you.
Oscar, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Nice to see many of these faces that I already recognize on my computer. Hopefully, we'll be able to meet locally sometime soon, and we can continue these conversations, because although these are very enriching and I learn from these sessions that we have together, I think when we often have additional time lingering around all these events, we also benefit tremendously from that. So Oscar, going directly into your question, and so allowing as much time for everyone to share their thoughts. What I'm going to try to add is from what we saw here over this over this year when we were looking at the Portuguese impact, or for the Portuguese perspectives on the different topics of using AI and the opportunities for AI. And what we really found is something that I think is well, the first and then the last comment is that everyone who's working on this in Portugal, the things that they're seeing, they don't really perceive this as being a Portuguese perspective. So they don't take it as being just their own. And they tend to relate it as this is just going to be generalizable and share with others. Now, we haven't tested it from the other front to see if everyone else also sees the same thing, but people in Portugal tend to see it as not just a Portuguese issue. Now, we talked with people that are working in large organizations, small organizations, and also from the government initiatives. Some of them are, like, when we publish this soon, you'll see that they went on record and they're named. Others disclosed some of their experiences and some of their thoughts, and they asked to be have that anonymously. But I think that it still enriches the conversation that we can have here. With regards to the risk assessments, one of the things that really came up is that we tend, when doing risk assessments, we tend to look at the probability and severity of impact of different actions or different events that might happen. And what soon came up was that at this level, the level of detection as well. So the ability that you have to really understand that something is happening, it might be happening under your nose, and if you don't know, you'll only recognize it later on. And so that is something that they're trying to pay attention a lot to, is this whole idea of not just assessing the potential risks, but also the ability to recognize that they are lingering there and that they might happen. So, and then they decouple this into the three, I think, more or less ordinary common levels. There's the simple AI, so it's just taking into account data that you already have existing and what you can do with it. Simple mathematical models and everything. They call it AI, maybe because of a branding issue at this point. But it's very much understandable what is happening there with the data that you're trying to process. And issues concerning there is just, can you use that data or not? So the issues, if it's environmental data or sensory data that you can collect from the environment, they feel comfortable exploring those systems. If it takes into account personal data, then we've completely flipped the coin, and it's, if you're using private data or personal data, the first perspective is you're doing something wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. It's until you prove that it's safe, it's not something that you should be working on. Okay, this is for the simple AI or simple systems. Now, then we have other teams or larger organizations that they're skilled, they have PhDs, they have people that have been working with technology for this type of technology for quite a while. They go into the black box AI, so the ones that are less easier to understand and decouple. And a lot of them, what they're talking about is the XAI, right? The explainable AI, and they really are investing in that front and trying to, okay, if we can show that this is doing it for its intended purposes, then we are going to be okay doing that. Okay, so different stances of different adoptions. And so the question is, so will this hamper the incentives for AI innovation or adoption? And so this is where they fold into, okay, if this is a non-risk, we're going to go ahead and we're going to implement at the different levels, at different stages of complexity, what we will. But if there's some risk, what we saw, maybe it's a cultural thing now, it's that they're going to be very risk averse in trying to do this, even in different sectors. And so large organizations, we saw banks that are very much risk averse in trying to implement some of these things. And their stance is the fast second. Okay? They're going to wait for someone else to show that it is okay, not just that it's possible, but it's okay to do it, before they take on some of these projects, which I think makes it interesting. So for large organizations and the troves of data, like a banking system is essentially a data trove that they have there, that we found that their position is much more of waiting and seeing what will happen and how some of these regulatory frameworks are going to be clarified before doing anything. probably if there's one concern, it's mostly that one. It's the speed with which regulations are going to be put out, and it's going to become available if it is possible or not for European organizations. So again, going back to the, they believe that it's not just a Portuguese issue, it's at a European level, is that how long are we going to take to establish these frameworks, and what is our level playing field for Europe? Because what they fear is that they might actually fall behind as European players with regards to what's happening in the United States and in China. And so I guess that's their main concern at the moment, is that they'll miss we'll fall further behind than others who are a little bit more liberal at approaching these dangerous topics and challenges. And that's, Oscar, essentially that's to get us going. I think that's what I wanted to share.
Okay. Thank you so much, João. And let us move on now to our second speaker. His name is Robert Dehm, and he works as a counselor in the permanent representation of Germany to the EU. Since July 2020, he's chair of the Council Working Party for Telecommunications and Information Society, and this will go on for the duration of the German presidency of the European Council. So Robert, thank you very much for being with us. Let us ask you a question first, and that would be the following. Can the EU bridge the AI readiness and digital gap that exists within its borders? And does the Commission's white paper address this topic effectively? We'll be delighted to know what you think about that. Robert, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me first to this distinguished panel. I'm really happy to be here with you and to discuss this topic today. I will answer right away your question. I think, to be honest, what we have now on the table as a counter facility to fight the COVID pandemic with the recovery and resilience facility gives us a once in a lifetime opportunity actually to invest exactly in the fight against this gap. So I think we have now some instruments at hand with these funds that are basically precedent, together with the Digital Europe program, where we can really move on and progress to a large extent in Europe, and hopefully we can also bridge the gap that you have mentioned. One prominent instrument that we are working on in the frame of the Digital Europe program, but can also be co-funded by other union programs, are the digital innovation hubs, European digital innovation hubs. They are actually there to bring the latest digital technologies, most notably also AI, in every region of the union, and to make it accessible not only for the big multinational companies, but also for the smaller one. And that, as I said, in every region. So there, I think the COVID pandemic actually offers us something that we wouldn't have had without it. So at least this aspect, we should really take care of it and make the most out of it. Yeah, that's basically the answer on your question. I don't know if you want like a general statement on AI or a reaction on what João said as well, or if you just want an answer on your question right now.
You can go on if you want to. Otherwise, we can just leave it for the Q&A later. So it's really up to you. If you want to go on, there's still some time. Okay, maybe some minutes. I think what João just mentioned, it showed exactly what we have to do now in the next couple of months in the frame of the Commission's AI white paper.
I had the impression that what João was trying to tell is that one of the most important things is actually that we need legal clarity on the one hand, and also rules that companies can deal with. I think that it's very important for the trust in AI to have this legal clarity, and also for Europe to be an attractive place to develop AI, that we have rules that are manageable and understandable even for smaller companies, startups, and so on. We are now in the preparatory phase of AI, of a basically horizontal AI regulation. And what we do as a presidency now, because we don't have any legal acts on the table to negotiate, but what we still do is to give ministers the opportunity in the frame of an informal ministers meeting that will take place this week in a virtual setting. We will give ministers the opportunity to actually state very clearly in which direction this horizontal regulation of AI that the Commission is working on should go and possibly should not go, and to collect basically here a condensed view of the Council to also help the Commission to some extent with the preparations. Yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say at this point.
Thank you so much, Robert, for bringing us this perspective from the center of the decision-making power. So let us now move on to Cinzia Guido. She is already, well, she's been to one of our digital talks before. So thank you again for joining us this time around as well. She is a Chief Operating Officer and Senior Digital Advisor at the EU delegation of Confindustria, which, as I said before, is the main Italian business federation. So the question to you, Cinzia, would be, does the Commission's approach to AI effectively help in enhancing Europe's industrial competitiveness? And could the proposed ecosystems of excellence and trust improve the output of businesses, especially SMEs? So we look forward to your answers on these or any other topics. You have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you also from my side for inviting Confindustria to this very well-timed actually debate on AI. As said, being the main Italian business association, obviously we represent a lot of SMEs, manufacturing sector. So in particular, let's say business users of AI, of those kind of technologies. Hence, we actively participate to the public consultation as well, together with our European Association, Business Europe. And in our response to the public consultation, we particularly underlined how we appreciate the positive tone of the Commission in, let's say, also highlighting the benefits and the opportunities that AI can bring to European economy and society. So no doubt that no member state alone can, let's say, support our global competitive standing in this crucial strategic area. So we are sure, we are convinced that just like all together, Europe can bring forward all this diversity of resources, and just together we can somehow be a global competitive player in AI. So we definitely support a European approach. We definitely support the Commission, let's say, pragmatic approach in defining these two, as already been said, pillars, dimensions, so the ecosystem of excellence and the ecosystem of trust. We think that those two dimensions are likely to reinforce one another. We definitely need, let's say, a legal framework, in particular to tackle legal challenges, to reinforce trust and uptake of AI. but trust not just from, let's say, the consumer side, but also from the business users alike. But at the same time, we need to boost investment, private and public investments in developing AI, data infrastructures, digital skills to also strengthen the network of digital innovation hubs. So if we talk from the point of view of the, let's say, ecosystem of trust, for sure our priority here is legal certainty, because SMEs and business users need to have a clear framework where they can move in. They need to know where specific, let's say, responsibility are placed in the value chain, developing AI. So in order also to be sure that at the end, the producer is not the only, let's say, responsible actor in the value chain, but also to be sure that a product that uses AI can be covered, let's say, from one single set of well-assigned product safety rules. But also, let's say that SMEs and business users that use AI need to have as much information as possible about how the AI system has been built, which kind of data set have been used. And these can obviously also help to create these, let's say, trust loop, but also these to encourage the uptake of AI. So AI developers, from our point of view, should also be encouraged in adding all this kind of information for the business users. Obviously, we think that any, let's say, new requirements, for instance, even market access requirement for risk AI should follow a risk-based approach. However, when we talk about the business, the risk-based approach, we have to keep in mind that it should be also easily adopted by SMEs. For instance, it was not always the case with the GDPR accountability principle. So we need to be sure that any, let's say, to avoid that potential burdens can rise somehow by the risk-based approach. We think that also to help this ecosystem of excellence and trust, and also to help the uptake of AI, a voluntary labeling system can be useful. But when we talk about the labeling system, also schemes, we think about private and public organizations working together in the same ecosystem that draft together, let's say, the minimum criteria to be used in that ecosystem. So in order to avoid also there that the dominant player at some point would end up defining a label that should be used then by all players, including SMEs. Another thing that is obviously crucial, it's digital skills. We need business to be also more, let's say, involved, to play a closer role in influencing all kind of national education, to be sure that the foreseen labor markets are somehow fulfilled, and that our citizens and also the workforce can have the right, let's say, STEM, all the horizontal skills that are needed to be active players in the digital economy. Another important tool, let's say, on which particularly Italian companies are relying a lot recently, is the network of digital innovation hubs, because at least in Italy, this network is working a lot to, let's say, ensure a closer collaboration between the public administrations, the public institutions, the financial institutions, the research community, and the business community. So we expect now this existing network to be reinforced also with the Digital Europe program. And we think because the digital innovation hubs can obviously play a role also in, let's say, spreading even more in coordinating the uptake and the development of AI in Europe. Last but not least, because we think this is actually a prerequisite for the development and uptake of AI, we need a vibrant, competitive, and dynamic data economy. So we need our companies to rely on a secure European data infrastructure that can be built on the also principle of portability of data, trust, and security, and interoperability as well. So I think these are the main, let's say, issues that we are pushing also in our, let's say, talks with the policymakers, and we hope, I mean, we can find them also in the next framework on AI. I try to keep on in the 5 minutes, but obviously I'm here for the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cinzia, for this very clear presentation and for bringing us the views from the industry. So we're halfway through our first panel, so I think it's a good time to remind all of our 96 participants now to submit their questions if they have any using the Q&A feature below. They can either write their questions and I can read them out loud later on, or they can book their interventions and they can speak briefly. So now let's move on to our next presenter from the European Commission, Kilian Gross. He is head of Unit A2 in the European Commission's DG for Communications, Networks, Content and Technology, which is responsible for technologies and systems for digitizing industry. His unit is in charge of the implementation and development of the digitizing European industry strategy, including the setting up of a network of digital innovation hubs in the EU. It also developed a coordinated plan on AI and is currently preparing the proposal for a European approach to AI. So thanks for being with us. And the question to you would be, how can we design an effective liability system for AI that does not hamper AI implementation, especially by SMEs? And can the risk-based system that the white paper takes be detrimental in this regard? So thank you very much for joining us, and you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Oscar, for the question. I'm very happy to speak about the white paper and the white paper process where we are. So we published the white paper in February. We did a very extensive public consultation where we had more than 1,215 submissions and more than 400.
We can't hear Kilian.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but if you can maybe speak a little bit closer to the mic or turn the volume up somehow, because it's much better now. Yeah, thanks.
Now it's good? Okay. So thanks a lot for this opportunity, Oscar, to speak a bit about this, the white paper process and the preparation of the regulatory framework. And I'm very grateful as well for the observations from the other participants, very, very useful for us. So we published the white paper in February, and we had as a follow-up process a public consultation where we had more than 1,215 written submissions and more than 400 position papers were handed over. So we had a very rich contribution, in particular from all kinds of the parts of the world, from business, from academia, from NGOs, from civil society. So the interest is huge. And we have seen that we had just on Friday, we had our yearly AI Alliance Assembly where we had more than 1,000 participants again with very intense discussion. So this is a topic, I think, where we really hit the nerve for the community, but as well as our society and the business is very, very interested in what we're doing. The president has taken that up in the State of the Union speech beginning of September by saying that in Q1 next year we will come out with a horizontal legal framework. So that's the object, the heading, the target thought we are heading. And you ask for liability, for which I'm not directly responsible. So liability we will look as well. That was a part of the white paper process. And there we look, obviously, we look into the product liability directive, and we look as well whether we need, on top of the product liability directive, we need additional rules. That is something we need, of course, to analyze further with our stakeholders. There's been a lot being said now today already about this future regulation. I now speak about the horizontal framework, which is really my competence in my unit. And here the target, what we look for is really to create trustworthy AI. So that's, I think, the best description of what we're trying to do. So and that's what as well, what I think what is the best reaction to what we learned from the public consultation. So that AI should be trustworthy in Europe, whether it's developed in Europe or used in Europe, people should be able to rely on this AI. Because AI in the future will be able to take more and more important decisions, be on the safety side, like embedded in products, in autonomous cars or in drones. It can seriously, or in robots, injure people or create damage to property, but as well in sophisticated software systems, be it a robot judge, or be it a recruitment tool, or be it a tool for allocation of social welfare. So there are important issues at stake, so we need to get it right. At the other hand, we see as well that there are huge opportunities for business. So we are aware that in Europe, we still are lagging behind after Asia and North America. So we want to boost that up. That's why we do this together, this ecosystem of excellence. Robert mentioned already a number of initiatives like the digital innovation hubs, but we have as well centers of excellence. We have public-private partnerships. We have the Adopt AI program. So we have a number of things. And the recovery and resilience facility, what Robert mentioned, I'm there very grateful, is really a key, because that would really allow to bring investments up to speed. So we want to do this together. We want to have investments on the one hand side and the regulation on the other side. And now we are often asked, is then not the regulation a bit impeding what you try to build with the left hand on the excellence side? Are you not creating new obstacles on the right hand side now with the regulation? We think not really, if we get it right. And meaning get it right means if we have a proportionate and a clear regulation, I think a legal certainty can boost business. And that's really what we should try to look for, that we identify cases where we really need to put in safety nets, where we have to have quality requirements. We want to work a lot with standards, where we have clear standards on what is needed, but where we as well are clear on which kind of AI does not need specific regulation, because it may, and we think there's a lot of AI just in use cases, which is just used every day already on your iPhone, which does not need a heavy or any regulation of any kind. So I think there are ways to do this in a proportionate way, in a clear way, to provide legal certainty. And if we follow this approach, that we really identify what we call a risk-based approach, what is high risk and where do we need to get active to set standards, then this can create trust, which is as well not only good for the consumers, but as well good for business. And this trust, to close up with your question, will of course help for the liability as well, because the safety part is of course always only the other side of the coin, because as you have a preventive protection of the consumer, which is safety, and you have a retrospective protection of the consumer, which is the liability part. So we look at, of course, on these issues in a comprehensive way. But above all, of course, we want to try to identify what is really risky, where do we need to get active, and what could be useful requirements in order to increase then the trustworthiness of these products and systems. Perhaps I stop here, and I'm very happy to take then your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Kilian Gross, for bringing us the view from the Commission. We really appreciate it. And let us now move on to another key actor in the EU decision-making process, which is the European Parliament. And we have two MEPs with us today, as I said before. The first one to speak will be Susana Solis. She's a member of the European Parliament in the Renew Europe group, and a member of the Special Committee for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Agenda. And our question to you, Susana, is can the EU's human-centered approach to AI, which includes preventing biases in algorithms, promoting a trustworthy AI and protecting human rights, coexist with the goal of becoming a more effective competitor in the AI race? So look forward to your comments on that. Susana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this event at such a timely moment. I hope next time we can meet at the European Parliament. And I will go directly to the question, because I think this is the key debate, whether European regulation in AI can be a limitation on Europe's competitiveness in this area. And I think it's normal that in its new technology, especially one with the transformative and cross-cutting potential that artificial intelligence has, the debate between regulation and competitiveness arises again. We are already experiencing the benefits of AI in an array of fields, but the boost that this technology has in our ability to analyze data opens up doors and capabilities that we don't have before, and also involves serious risk and also raises a number of ethical challenges. Algorithms can make decisions that affect the fundamental rights of people. They have the potential to create discriminations and inequalities and to call into question human autonomy. And I think all of us agree as a prerequisite, AI should be a human-centric technology. It should not substitute human autonomy nor assume the loss of their individual freedom. It should first serve the needs of the people and the common good, making sure technology is built and applied for the benefit of everyone. So in order to ensure that AI fulfills its objectives, not only technical, but also to serve people, a number of legal, regulatory, and ethical standards need to be put in place. And that will ensure that people can understand decisions involving the use of AI and gain trust. So our legal and ethical value system does not allow for an alternative in this respect. There is no doubt that risks need to be regulated, and we need this human-centered approach. The question is whether we will be able to reconcile these requirements with legislation that at the same time enables us to ensure economic growth and prosperity for our citizens. And I think this is something that we should further analyze in this AIDA committee in the European Parliament. We should analyze the future impact of artificial intelligence, in particular on training, employment, and the economic performance in various areas. And there is a broad consensus, as you mentioned, that the future regulation should follow a risk-based approach, as the Commission proposed it in the white paper, with this distinction between high-risk and low-risk application. I think mandatory ex-ante requirements for high-risk applications are very important. Ex-post enforcement mechanisms need to be ensured also. But I think to ensure Europe's global competitiveness, we have to make sure that, for example, we have objective criteria to identify correctly the risks without hindering innovation and technological progress unnecessarily. I think there cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution to address all the issues related to artificial intelligence. And we need to avoid over-regulation of low-risk AI applications. As the Commission said, better regulation does not mean more or less EU legislation. So I think it's also important we must start from existing legislation. In this sense, I think the GDPR are good starting points that we must analyze in order to determine whether to modify them or, if it's necessary, supplement them with other regulations. I think also legislation may contain exceptions, for example, to ensure that certain organizations like SMEs, which might have greater difficulty in dealing with certain regulatory requirements, need to be taken into account so that their ability to compete in their market is not undermined and they can have access to the technology and to its adoption. So it is also important for me that AI regulations are future-proof, promoting, for example, regulatory sandboxes, especially for startups and other innovative companies. And finally, creating an ecosystem of trust, but also creating an ecosystem of excellence, which means, and you mentioned it before, access to data and its analytics, for example, EU capacity building for data infrastructure and computing systems, overcome fragmentation and tackle these research silos we have in Europe, and create more synergies between public and private research in AI to boost investments. And for sure, attract the best talents in Europe, because as we know, we have skills shortage here. So I finalize, I think we have a unique opportunity to shape this new generation technology. And this can happen in a way that enhances opportunity for our entrepreneurs and developers and encourage them to invest and innovate. I believe EU has the potential to become a world leader in AI. We have the chance to set the standards that will shape the future. And just to say, let's all take advantage of it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Susana Solis, for this very inspiring presentation. And we agree that this is indeed one of the key issues of today. And we're going to explore different dimensions of it with our other MEP who's joining us today. Her name is Edina Toth, and she is an MEP for the European People's Party Group. She was elected as a full member of the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety Committee, and a substitute member of both the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee, and for the Industry, Research and Energy Committee. She has become the only Hungarian member of the Special Committee on AI in a Digital Age. So first of all, thank you very much for being with us today. And let me ask you a related question, which is, can the EU become a real global competitor in the race for AI? And how can the upcoming AI legislation help us to achieve this? And what other priorities should it pursue? So we'll be really glad to know your thoughts on this. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you and discuss this very important topic. And I truly hope that next time, sometime in the future, we will be able to have such kind of discussions physically at a physical meeting as well, and not only in the digital world. And let me start with that. In my opinion, artificial intelligence has already arrived because it is a technology of the present, and it is certainly proving to be a double-edged sword. Why do I say this? Because on the one hand, it radically transforms expectations of the labor market, opens up new dimensions for improving efficiency, and offers the potential for substantial economic growth. And on the other hand, AI gave rise to a host of unwanted consequences. What do I mean? For example, the most visible and loudest concerns touch the issue of the privacy violation, discrimination, or the lack of trust. And the Special Committee on AI, which I have the honor to be Vice President of, will be particularly important, in my opinion, in developing favorable conditions for the future AI development. IDA, which is the abbreviation of the committee, will not deal with specific legislative acts, but it will rather create a framework to address many ethical, social, and economic implications of AI. And in addition, the Special Committee will further investigate the challenges of deploying AI and its contribution to business value and economic growth, whilst scrutinizing third countries' AI approaches, for example. And I believe that during our work, we need to focus on the human dimension in order that AI will always be at the service of our citizens. I think this is very important. And I truly believe that IDA will have a core importance in defining common EU objectives in the medium and long term, and include the major steps needed to reach those targets. I think that with a clear and proper legal framework, which of course respects our fundamental values, AI has a great potential to tackle the most significant challenges our generation is facing with. And in my opinion, it's crucial to design a regulatory framework which ensures that innovation can flourish and European tech companies can be in the front line in a way that it respectful of the fundamental rights of the individuals and of the societal values at the same time. And therefore, in particular, we should support European enterprises which are operating here and create future workplaces in a focused and dynamic manner by building on the existing competitive advantages and by gaining a position in the currently developing industries. And I think it's also important at the same time that we need to further raise awareness and educate consumers about what AI is, when and how it is used, what the risks are, what to do if something goes wrong. And the interest of businesses and consumers should go hand in hand to make the European industry more competitive vis-a-vis China and the US. And in the global AI race, the EU is often positioned as struggling for the bronze medal behind the USA and China. And indeed, while Europe does maintain an important role in global AI development, particularly in terms of fundamental research, it is widely recognized that the USA and China dominate the front line of global AI development. And this is often explained in reference to their higher level of investment, lower levels of data protection, and an appetite for application and adoption. And to conclude, I think AI is going to impact our everyday life. Businesses of all shapes and sizes across all the industries. And with a new European human-centric framework, I'm confident that the EU can lead the world towards a more fair, trustworthy and transparent AI system. And I'm confident that the new committee, IDA, will have a central role in this development. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Edina Toth, for this also very engaging presentation. Thank you very much for being with us today. And let us now move on to the Q&A section. We have received a couple of questions, some of them directed to specific panelists and some other maybe a little bit more general. But let me start with another MEP. She will actually participate in our second panel today, so it will be a very nice way to find a bridge between the first one and the second one. Her name is Maria Manuel Leitao, and she is the vice chair of IMCO, which is the Committee on the Internal Market and Consumer Protection. And her question is directed to Cinzia Guido. And Cinzia, she would like you to elaborate a little bit more on your point related to product safety. So this would be your chance for that.
Yeah, sure. I mentioned the fact that it's important for business users, but for business in general, but in particular for small companies, to rely on just one single set of rules when we talk about product safety as well. We know that obviously the Commission is also looking at what extent new technologies can somehow change safety in a product. So given that, we also within Business Europe, we are trying to comment on this, on the possible revision of the directive. And we, in our comments, first of all, we highlighted the fact that obviously we think that with those kind of new technologies and AI, and also with future innovation, it's first of all impossible. What we have to keep in mind is that it's impossible to demonstrate that we will have 100%, let's say, safety. So it's important also to, let's say, when we talk about the introduction of a precautionary principle for product safety, as some stakeholders have also raised, it can be disproportionate and compared to, to the current application. There are also some talks about cybersecurity schemes to make them mandatory for smart products. Even there, given the current situation, in particular the COVID crisis, thinking about making all the mandatory requirement, all cybersecurity requirement mandatory, especially for products, for consumer products, would be disproportionate, would be really costly also for small companies. While, as already been defined in the Cybersecurity Act or in the NIS directive that will also be reviewed, it would be important to make those requirements mandatory if necessary for high-risk sectors. There is also another, let's say, aspects to be kept in mind. Obviously, that new technologies can also bring, let's say, can enhance somehow product safety. So, for instance, for when we talk about labeling, so the Commission, it's important also the Commission to keep this in mind and to also not be too prescriptive when the revision will be in place. One thing obviously is product safety. One thing will be also the liability directive, which is also something that I mentioned in my speech. In particular, there we need to know where responsibility are placed in the value chain. So if there is the need also to review, for instance, the definition of producer and to take into account other players, which can be the AI developers or those that gathers and collect data, it's also the time to do it. And also in order to be sure that like producers, which normally are also coming from a more traditional sector, like the manufacturing sector, cannot be, let's say, defined as the only responsible for the for eventual, like for potential, let's say, problems that rise in developing or in distributing AI. I don't know if.
Thank you very much, Cinzia, for your answer. So let us take another question from Julia Del Gamba. She's asking about the criteria to determine high-risk applications. The definition does appear in the white paper, but I'm sure that some of our presenters, perhaps even Kilian Gross from the Commission, will like to elaborate a little bit on this criteria. So this will be your chance for that.
Sure, thanks a lot. Indeed, the definition of what is high risk is absolutely crucial, and that was highlighted again now by the European Council conclusions on the 7th, 10th, and 11th of October, where the European Council has basically said that there should be a definition of high risk. So I think it's indeed essential, because of what we just discussed. When we want to make the legal requirements really clear and previsible, we need to be very objective and previsible on what is high risk, because that will be the factor which will bring in the requirements into the game, where the developers and providers of the AI systems will have to go through additional tests, for instance, or satisfy additional requirements. So we think we elaborated a little bit already on this in the white paper. I think there are certain categories of risk which we will certainly look at, like life, liberty, personal belongings, property, other things. But as well, of course, we need to look at the classification of risk. So we need to look at what is a serious risk, how likely is a risk, how probable is it that the risk occurs, how serious would the risk be, is the risk reversible or irreversible. So all these are things, of course, which are quite important for the assessment of risk. And on that basis, I think we will be able to identify certain use cases or areas of application of AI where this kind of risk is likely to occur. So to give the user a clear indication where and when we would consider that certain applications or certain uses could be risk. I mean, we gave in the AI white paper, I think, already some examples of what our thinking. We mentioned the recruitment, or we mentioned biometric identification as candidates. We didn't say this is conclusive, so there must be on such a list, or on such a included in such a system. But there are certainly candidates to which we have to look very carefully. And here, of course, as well, we should rely really on scientific knowledge, so to check whether we have evidence and whether there is a clear-cut case. We should not just, because we fear that there could be a certain risk in the future, already put certain things on the list. And I want to be as well clear on this, because we're really discussing, just to put things a little bit into perspective, we're really discussing high risk here. So these should be things which are essential for fundamental goods or rights. Not every risk, because every technology comes, of course, with a certain risk, but it comes as well with a certain benefit. So we need to make sure that as well we allow these benefits to flourish and to come to our market, and not just look at the risk. So we should identify where we really have high risk, so we want to be strict. But at the same time, I think in the risk assessment, we need as well to look a little bit at the benefits. Right? For instance, in this COVID crisis, exactly this discussion, when new technologies with AI came in, which perhaps were not yet tested on the European market, but they were the best available. Do you want not to use them just because they perhaps should first undergo lots of tests in Europe, or is it because it's the best available, not a big progress already to be able to use that? So I think that we need to bear in mind, if we assess new technologies as well, if they bring a lot of advantages, for instance, in comparison to a traditional human-driven product or service, that could already be a strong indication that we should, which we should take into account. For instance, if the autonomous car has a much lower error rate or accident rate than a human-driven car, that should already be, I think, a strong indication. So that are some elements to show you in which way we are reflecting and how we want to address this item of risk, which, and there I agree, and I'm grateful for the question, is indeed key. We must find a balanced approach to risk. We must identify what is really high risk and how we want to assess the risk in order to have a manageable and a socially acceptable risk. Because it will not, it needs to be, it should be as well clear in our communication, we will never have a completely risk-free technology. But as long as the benefits clearly outweigh the risks, I think we need to have the social discussion about this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your answer. We're going to take another question that we received this time from one of our researchers at SDGeo, Tirso Virgos. It's a question directed to all panelists, so whoever wants to pick it up, they're most welcome to. The question is, can we afford a disruption of our labor market right now in the wake of the crisis? Could this create a sort of backlash against AI? And can governments spend the necessary resources for effective deployment of this technology in the context of economic constraints? I think maybe Edina Toth wants to speak.
Yes.
I don't know if it's about this question, but feel free to answer if you want.
Yes, it's this question. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy for this question. Why? Because all the time when I post on my social media about AI, these are always the first comments. And what about the effect on the labor market? So it seems like that for the citizens, this is the crucial and very important issue. And I just want to say that AI will certainly reshape the labor market, but it does not necessarily mean AI will contribute to job loss, because the labor market and the society need to adapt themselves to these new changes and consider AI as a handy tool. And we should also not forget that AI can also create new type of jobs in the labor market. So it's not a thing that we have to be afraid of. And it's equally important that the existing workforce and future talents develop the skills they need to leverage the job opportunities that the AI will offer. And in this sense, I think the training and the digital gap widening is very, very important. And for this, we need to modernize Europe's education curricula and improve the training system, and including the reskilling, the upskilling, because with this, I think we will be able to achieve that AI can have a very positive effect on the labor market and create new types of jobs. And we should, I think, forget this principle that many people for the time being are afraid of this, to lose their jobs, because with training and skills, we can really contribute to create new jobs, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for taking this question. So now we'll move on to another one that we received from Adrian Kovacs. I'm just going to read it out loud. He says he would be interested in the panelist's stance on the German Data Ethics Commission's recommendation on proposing 5 different risk levels, ranging from banning certain AI applications to imposing lighter mandatory requirements. How could such a 5-level risk-based approach be enforced And how could legal certainty be ensured with such a system? Thank you. So I think maybe this would be a good question for Robert Dehm, but whoever else wants to jump in, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I mean, the question is quite difficult, I would say, in a way, and I'm not sure if any of us can give a very clear answer. I mean, we have this work that was done by the Data Ethics Commission, and they did a really valuable work and with intensive studying. And I think it was also for the Commission really a source of many facts and arguments and so on for the preparatory work of the horizontal regulatory framework that they're at the moment developing. I mean, as I already said before, what is very important is that we have clear rules, that someone who offers a AI product knows very well in which category, I would say, the company or the product would fall, and then which rule would then apply. I think that's a very important thing. And if it's then 5 categories or 4 or the number, I think that is not the most important thing. And I'm also not sure what number or what exact categories the Commission at the moment envisages. But I think as a basic principle, this is this should be the leading thought, that we have a proportionate rules that are also easily manageable in the end, because otherwise we just don't achieve the balance that we are looking for between like creating actually a framework for innovation and at the same time safeguarding most of all our fundamental rights.
Thank you very much, Robert, for taking the question. And since 4 of you were able to participate a couple of times, I wanted to give the 2 remaining speakers of the first panel to share their words, if they have any, about each other's presentations of any of the questions that were asked. So Susana Solis and João Castro, this would be the time to do so if you're willing to.
Now, so just to thank you, all of you, because that's the kind of discussion we need to have in our committee in the European Parliament. I think we need to give confidence to the consumers. We need this trustworthy technology, and it is clear, like the question that they addressed before, how it will affect the labor market, how it will affect the education, and we need to work not just on the ethical, but also on the impact that it will have in the economy, in our social lives, and we need to make of this technology a very trustworthy technology for the people. This is our mission here in the Parliament, and it is very important that we know the work you are doing in the Commission, and we can influence in this job. So thank you, just to thank all of you for this invitation.
Thank you for being here once again. And let me now move on to João Castro. If you have any final thoughts, you can share them with us.
Yeah, well, a little bit in line with what's just shared, but also offering a little bit of redundancy, I think, to a lot of what was said in this panel, and especially when Cinzia and then Kilian, when they mentioned so that some of these frameworks will have to be derived from these discussions and society as a whole tackling this issue. That is something that we also saw. So when we were talking with different actors in Portugal, oftentimes they were asking, so after this, are you guys going to set up workshops where we can all discuss these different things? And so at all these different layers of the discussion that was happening, I think that a lot of the actors are willing, they understand that this is something that's going to come into our reality and how to face it. No one is prepared. And what they really are asking is, okay, we can study this, but we really need, as a society, because it takes touches on all these different levels of the employment, but also our value system of what we want to do, the risks that we are willing to take, the exploration that we have to do together. It requires a huge network of conversations, of discussions happening. So I'm very honored to be part of this one, and this discussion and learning from all of you. And hopefully this is something that we can extrapolate to involve more people at different levels, continuing these conversations that definitely need to happen.
Thank you, João, and we absolutely agree. We hope we can start a conversation about this. So thanks all of you for attending today. It was a privilege to moderate this first panel. I think we got some excellent insights about this very crucial topic. And I would like to remind all of you that you can stick around for the second panel if you'd like to, which will be starting right after the keynote speech. So once again, thank you, and let me move on and give the floor to Stefano da Empoli, who will be the one introducing our keynote speaker today.
Thanks, Oscar, and thanks to all the panelists, first panelists for the very vivid discussion. And yeah, I don't think we need Roberto Viola needs any particular introduction. I'm very glad he's here with us. Roberto participated to many events that we organized physically in Rome or Brussels or whatever. This time is the first one, but being the Director General for the, in charge of digital policies, it's in line with digital issues, and we asked him to speak about setting European rules for the global digital era. So giving us a broader feeling of what European policies on digital are going to. Of course, we know, this event is mostly going through AI and DSA, that are the two main topics for this year, and I think for the next years. But we asked you to give us a broader sense of what policies from the European Commission are directed to. Thanks, Roberto, again for being here.
Thank you very much, Stefano. I hope you can hear and listen to me and see me.
Yeah.
So we
made
the first step. Now let's make the second, which is I deliver with pleasure my consideration on. You gave me a very simple topic, to set the scene on the broader issue about digital governance in the world, which is a very simple task. But okay, I accept the challenge and try to give you what is my feeling, what is the role of Europe, and what exactly we can do to actually contribute to the development of a sustainable and meaningful way of using digital tools in order to improve our quality of life and our economy. Now, we have published in February our digital strategy. This has been a kind of stepping stone into the new commission in terms of setting the scene and also the program for the years to come. And it was only 2 weeks before the lockdown and before, the explosion of the pandemic. And of course, it seems now 10 years ago, and it seems that, what we have said maybe was belonging to the old world rather than the so-called new normal. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I think the basic elements of what we said in February are even more essential looking at what some call the new normal, what we will do after having beaten, hopefully soon, this pandemic, and during this pandemic. I mean, because what we said in February is that, of course, Europe will never abandon the idea that digital should be human-centered and helping humans to be better in terms of quality of life, interaction, and in order to advance our society. That is the fingerprint of a digital made in Europe, and of course this is ever so essential in this very difficult moment for the world. The second thing we said is that we need a data-driven society, a society that is capable to use data, to understand data, and to extract the best that you can have from data in order to advance in every possible sector. And I frankly believe that one of the things that kept us together during this pandemic is exactly exchanging data, being it data because it's a video connection, that ultimately it's all about data, but also using data to understand the pandemic, using data to find new drugs, to simulate vaccines, and also to understand how to get out of the economic crisis. So in everything we have done, in everything we need to do, the usage of data, the sharing of data, the generation of data has been the centerpiece of trying to manage. So this is another element that actually has been enormously amplified by this pandemic. The third element, which we set, was the use of AI, again, human-centered, and also, I mean, being in equilibrium, in having an ecosystem of excellence, so where the R&D and the new ideas could really blossom, and at the same time have a solid ecosystem of trust rather than of rules. I really stress trust rather than rules. I mean, we are not obsessed by the idea that every time there's something new, there should be rules around. I'm more for the idea that people should trust the new technologies, and in particular artificial intelligence, which I understand was the subject of the previous panel. So we need to make sure that people can use the new advancements that artificial intelligence can bring with confidence. And again, looking at diagnostic systems, looking at the design of new drugs, artificial intelligence has been heavily used during this crisis. Not really, I mean, probably with the full success we were expecting. That means that there's a lot of advancement still to be done. And those that believe that artificial intelligence could solve everything, unfortunately discovered that this type of artificial intelligence that we now manage is the so-called commercial one for, I mean, giving you very nice advice how to buy a pair of shoes, but not yet at the level that a modern and a data-driven society needs. So there's a lot of work to do in R&D. There's a lot of investment that is necessary to step up our collective level, to understand our planet, to understand our body, and to really model things in a way that can be everything more safe and better. So, ecosystem of excellence, investing in artificial intelligence, and trust. And then, of course, it came during the summer the issue about being fit for purpose as Europe when it comes to the recovery. And the answer which heads of state and government have given on the impulse of the European Commission has been impressive, because the 2.4 trillion package that has been put together, the multi-annual framework program, plus the recovery plan, plus all the other instruments, it's really an unprecedented injection of support into the European economy and society. But one thing which is very important, which it's a little bit in continuity with what happened in February, is that we see very much digital as a generation project. We see very much digital and green being the two twin transformation as the long-term project that would change our society for better. So this is not something that should happen tomorrow, although the recovery of Europe is needed very much yesterday and today and tomorrow. The way we want to organize the recovery, the way, I mean, it has been designed and discussed by the leaders is that we will invest in a structural change. So we will help recovery and sustainable recovery through structural change of our economic system. That's why you have seen that the structure also of the Council, European Council conclusion, the leaders discussed digital after the impulse given by the Commission President in the first State of the Union address, which was really very powerful in many respects, but especially when it comes to boosting the two twin transitions, and in particular, I mean, really setting the scene for what we need to do in digital. And this has been echoed by the conclusion of the European Council, which set the objective of 20% spending for the recovery plan as a legal objective for every member state, which is an impressive injection of resources into the digital transformation of Europe, and is a unique opportunity in a certain sense. The European Council also said the Commission should come next March with a digital compass. So with what we should expect as collective targets for the next decade when it comes to digital. Reinforcing a little bit the idea I was trying to pass to you, that this issue about digital policy and digital transformation is not something for yesterday or today, but it's something for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years. So we do things looking at the long-term future of Europe and the world. This is why, I mean, you will see a continuous parallelism in investing in excellence, like, I mean, in the era of microelectronics, microprocessor, high-performance computing, quantum data, and investing in political capital, in rules that could set the scene, the world scene, on how to do things in a way that this notion of human-centric digital development is really reality. We kind of have the world award, let's call it this way, for regulating the digital environment, and I think we want to continue in breaking new ground and making sure that since your request was to also look at the global scenario, that this role of Europe using the twin transition to master the recovery, investing in a new generation, in new generations, looking at the skills, looking at the excellence, looking at the right rules. This really sets the European way of doing things, which a little bit could be read against models which are very distant from this, models which are more looking from the central authoritarian state point of view, or models which are excessively relying on private actors, let's say, fixing everything. And we know from the coronavirus that there's a limit to it. We know from coronavirus that without public help in, for instance, healthcare policies, we will not go very far into this. We know from this crisis that without injection of human capital and ideas which are diverse or simply selling products, we will not go very far. So I think the new normal, it's really on this parallel track, setting the rules, clear rules, not too many, but clear, and at the same time, I mean, investing in excellence. And this is an occasion that Europe cannot miss on both sides. That's why it's so important that, I mean, following the proposal we will make on data governance, on regulating, I mean, the relationship between platform business users and the equilibrium between offering the services and respecting, I mean, rights, principle, and of course, obligation towards the society. Looking at human-centric AI, the European Council asked us also to define what are the risk applications for AI, where a closer watch should be there. By doing all this, and by now injecting an impressive and unprecedented amount of resources into investments in connectivity, in high technology, we hope really, I mean, that collectively we have the magic plan to make digital not only the solution for exiting this crisis, but also the solution for a long-lasting growth opportunities for the generations to come. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Roberto, for being here and giving us this speech on the future of Europe at the end. I mean, thanks to digital investments and rules. As I said, I mean, at the beginning, I mean, the two pillars of the European strategy. So thanks again. I think we can move on to the second panel on the essay and give the floor to Angelos Tsakanikas. Please, Angelos.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, Stefano. My name is Angelos Tsakanikas. I come from EOVE, which is a Greek private think tank that does economic research in Greece, and I'm also associate professor at the National Technical University of Athens in innovation and entrepreneurship. And I will coordinate a little bit this panel that we have formulated here on the Digital Services Act, which is a very challenging package, as you can understand. It has already gained a lot of attention. It is a difficult, indeed, issue, because you need various elements of the ecosystems to find the balance between competition, between suppliers, between the consumers, SMEs. It is an issue that requires a lot of attention, and a lot of opinions are in place. We have, as a network, we have already published a small paper on what are our first remarks, let's say. And this is, you can follow this on our website. For instance, we highlight that this new regulation should guarantee a trustful and reliable playing field without overbearing platforms hindering new entrants and SMEs, but at the same time, full liability should be required for platforms selling their own labeled products. And we also highlight the fact that we need to tackle more vigorously disinformation, online disinformation, and things like that. I mean, this is a work in progress for us. We try to come up with some policy conclusions to the various aspects of the Digital Services Act, and you can follow our work on our site. Now, we have as the topic is indeed diverse, we also, the panel, we think we have established a panel that could help us see the different aspects that the Digital Services Act has. And I hope that all the panelists are here. We will proceed and we'll see. I will start with Ricardo Castanheira, which is from the Permanent Representation of Portugal. And I will follow, of course, the format that has already been followed in the first panel, and I will come up with the question that we feel that you have the expertise to provide us with some insights. So our first approach is, how do you really assess the possible obstacles that such a new regulation may pose, if there are any obstacles indeed, to new entrants, intermediaries and sellers, and is indeed this hindering innovation, Ricardo?
Well, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much, Angelos, and thank you to ICOM and PromethEUs to inviting me to attend this great panel and great event with such great professionals. I would say that, and starting to say that it's unavoidable to discuss the issues at stake, since the e-commerce is absolutely obsolete. After 20 years of digital markets, the digital market changed a lot, and we should all recognize the need of an updating to the rules. And there is also something that is obvious to all of us: market imbalances which should need to be tackled to ensure a level playing field and especially protect our SMEs. Those are the two main reasons that the first question is, should we move on or not? Yes, we believe that we should move on. Then I think that there are two big questions. How can we ensure that as legislators, we put up a regulation that doesn't negatively impact on the small players, especially SMEs and startups? This is the first big question. And the second one is, how can we prevent also collateral damage while addressing, for example, the gatekeepers, unfair behavior, and the other digital market problems? I would say that probably there is first, we must recognize that digital markets are extremely complex and have a unique character, unlike the physical ones. What I would say is, sometimes we do have that idea that the rules that we apply on the physical world should also apply on the digital ones. It's true, but it's not always true. There is a technicality. There is something that it's very single and unique on the digital that must be taken into consideration when we start to regulate whatever it is. Second, it's about the recognition of a somehow, I would say, paradoxical nature of having the startups defending sometimes the same arguments as the big ones. I just left a discussion with the European Federation of Apps developers, and they've started to present to me several reasons. Then, if I turned or switched off the image, I would believe that I was talking with the big tech. Because in fact, why does it happen? Because large platforms, they are now working as a startup hubs too. And this is very important for us. The small players are too dependent on the ecosystems created by the platforms that actually brings opportunities and benefits for the growth, not just of the startups to scaling up, but also for the SMEs. Therefore, we must be careful when we impose some obligations and make sure that these do not indirectly jeopardize the small actors. Third, I would say that if we base the regulatory dimension, for example, on the definition of the gatekeepers platform, just on the size, will this not disincentivize other players to scale up? This is a good question, I believe. Fourth, and we've heard this already in the previous panel, which is very interesting because there are an overlap of reasons, besides the fact that we are talking about two different issues, but in fact is a digital as one. One size does not fit all. We are always listening this kind of say. And it's true, and the criteria to define gatekeeper platforms should, for example, be based on quantitative and qualitative indicators. I would say that, for example, moreover, defining the framework for legal principles, we must make sure that there are, or these are evidence-based. Lastly, we think it's important to note, Portugal does not have yet a national position. And that was a political decision because as upcoming presidency, we must behave as honest brokers. And we thought, and we still do think that it's the most transparent way to deal with the issues. Nevertheless, we do have, of course, ideas about the problems, and we are mapping and tracking the big bottlenecks that we do have when discussing DSA. And the last thing that I would like to underline is the recognition of the importance of the country of origin principle as an effective cornerstone of the digital single market. It allowed the growth of SMEs, and especially if we risk to undermine this principle, we will live on a fragmentation of the regulatory environment in the EU, and it will be for sure a big burden for the SMEs and for the startups, which is something that is very close to our heart in Portugal.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricardo. And I think it is very important for countries like Greece and Portugal to develop such a strategy, because indeed there are mixed opinions in this. I think Pablo Arias Echeverria is not with us, or not with us yet. So I will go directly to Luke Hendrick, which is, let's see, the opinion of SMEs. He's the director, competitiveness of enterprises and legal affairs, SME United. And what I want to ask Luke is exactly this on SMEs.
You know what I did?
Ah.
Because I logged in and I was.
Sorry.
Hello?
Yes, yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh.
We will come back to you later. Huh? Okay, thank you. So, Luke, let's turn on our views on SMEs. What could be the key policy measures to protect and promote the participation of SMEs in digital markets? What do you think that will be the impact on SMEs on their effort to develop e-commerce or e-commerce channels, at least in the short run, and maybe in the long run, if you have an opinion on this?
Thank you, Angelos. And first of all, I would like to thank PromethEUs for inviting SME United in this panel. SME United is the representative European SME organization. We only represent the interest of small and medium-sized enterprises. First of all, I think that everybody agrees that that we have to improve the participation of SMEs in digital trade and in the internal market as a whole, but also beyond. I think that if we look at the data, it is clear only 20% of the SMEs are fully digitalized, while 57% of large enterprises are fully digitalized. So there is still a lot to do. One of my main remarks is that we have to take into account that one of the major, and I insist on this, one of the major obstacles for SMEs to digitalize is their limited ability to recognize, to discover, to understand their digital needs, and consequently also to make the right investments in digital solutions in order to match those digital needs. And we should always keep this in mind when we are thinking about policies, because this will continue to be the main issue that we have to solve if we want to help small and medium-sized enterprises. Having said this, we can help them, and I think it was also the representative of the German permanent representation who mentioned rightly the digital innovation hubs. It's important that they are rolled out as soon as possible, developed as soon as possible, because those digital innovation hubs, they have the possibility, or they will offer the possibility to small and medium-sized enterprises to test solutions before that they are going to invest in digital solutions. They will also provide digital skills and training and so on. But there is a condition, of course, that they are close to the business organizations. Then coming back on the Digital Services Act. First of all, we fully agree and we fully support the objectives of the European Commission and the aims that the European Commission has put forward concerning the Digital Services Act. And there are some general comments on it. First of all, we think that we have to ensure that the rules should apply equally to all digital service providers, regardless of their origin of establishments. It's also necessary to review the e-commerce directive, and Ricardo also rightly mentioned that we have to maintain the principles of country of origin, but also the liability regime. We also fully support, and it's also necessary to come up with an ex-ante regulatory framework. And there we would also support the prohibition or the restriction of certain unfair trading practices. And Ricardo also rightly highlighted that, in fact, it's not a question of size. We saw this also in the discussion with the regulation on the platform to business regulation. It's not a question of small against big. It's a question of fairness and of fair behavior by some platforms. So we have also to ensure that this legislation, of course, will not prevent innovative small and medium-sized enterprises to enter the market. And we are also, last but not least, in favor of a targeted revision of the competition law. You ask a second question on the impact of SMEs wishing to develop their e-commerce channels in the short run. Well, I would say it's a little bit dangerous to say in the short run, because especially with investments, you have to think on the longer run. And we saw during the COVID crisis that a lot of SMEs had now to invest in e-commerce. They were forced to do it. But the question is and will remain of this investment in e-commerce will remain profitable, because during the lockdown, they had only to deal with e-commerce and not with their normal brick and mortar sales. So the question is if they will be able to do the same things at the same time. This will be very difficult, and we have certainly to keep an eye on this. But in any case, we think that the SDA will help the SMEs to address the challenges and the new market necessities which are coming to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Indeed, you raised some good points there. Sometimes it's not an issue of training or wishful thinking. It's a matter of resources. SMEs do not have the resources to invest in digital transformation, and we have also to take that in mind. I would go to Maria Manuel Leitão Marques now. She's a member of the European Parliament, Vice Chair in the Internal Markets Committee. And my question to Maria is a little more general. What are of course, the key policy issues that the DSA could bring to the global digital trade? And what is the position of EU in this global trade? How this could be improved, or the advantages or the disadvantages that you see? Maria, you are muted.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation and for this very, very, very interesting meeting. Not only this one, but the other one I attended before. So let me start by the basics. In the past, we conceived consumer rights to correct market imbalances and information asymmetries, of course, between consumers and trades. This is the origin of consumer law in the European level, and not only also in member states. And at the beginning of the internet, some of us were convinced that all those problems of imbalance were going to be solved because the market became transparent and every consumer could compare prices and conditions while at home. And today we know that this is not true. The market power of platforms is huge, and the network effects make it bigger each second. Big data and AI mechanisms, we know, are reinforcing that power, leaving consumers unprotected. And this is the problem. First, the consumers have been suppressed of their data, afterwards of their real capacity of choice, and even the right to say no. Consent is an illusion nowadays. And it's like if we go naked to the market, we stop at the first merchant, and he's sees and knows about my problem. Even worse, he knows me better than I know myself sometimes. So what can we do to improve the consumer protection and to rebalance this situation? So it's why we need an adequate and effective, that is a very good law in books, but also a very good law in action. And this is a very important point that we discussed before about AI regulation. And this is an essential element to this reimbalance. And DSA will be a very important piece of it, maybe the most important one. And what does an adequate and effective regulatory framework mean? Let me give you some example using the same metaphor as before. First, we need to get traces to recover some privacy. Consumer data must not be used to gain unfair advantage. If a merchant knows I searched how to fix my fridge, for example, he or she may be able to exploit my bias and hyper-nudge me to buying a new one. We have to restrict the ability to collect massive amounts of data online, especially if those data are not essential to provide the services we are looking for. And besides this, there is a question of monetization. Providers are profiting from the collection of my data, of our data, not only by exploiting our bias, but also by selling to advertisers. Should we allow this to happen? We really only have two options. Either we accept this practice, but regulate it, commanding providers to share some of their profit with consumers. That is the model of data dividends. Or we stop it entirely, ruling out that personal data can be a tradable property. And we should also act in the concentration of power of big platforms. Imagine if only merchants knew everything about you and the rest of them didn't. That is what is happening with our SMEs, as we heard before. Would that be fair? It wouldn't. So I'm very happy that I know that Commission intends to mandate big platforms to share their data on customers with smaller providers. And secondly, we must arm ourselves, this is a very important point, with the same weapons that big players use against consumers. Banning their weapons is a Luddite answer that does not solve the problem. We cannot stop innovation. On the contrary, you must use it. We must use AI to empower consumers. We have some examples of consumer empowering tools already used. We use them every day and do not even think about anti-spam filters, ad blockers online, and so on. We can use AI to scan terms and conditions in websites and flag clauses that we should not be accepting. In Portugal, for example, one of the several projects we have is using AI. There is a lot of projects we are developing between our academia, researchers, and our public entities. And one of them is using AI coupled with a chatbot to give consumers better access and insight into consumer rights legislation. Imagine you are at the airport and your flight is cancelled. When you describe the situation to the chatbot, it is able to point you towards the appropriate legislation and also to translate legislation into plain language in order you understand it. And so we also, and we are trying to do, empower our surveillance authorities using AI to flag risky circumstances. This is using the same weapons to empower consumers. And for this is, of course, important to provide digital literacy to consumers and also civil society organizations that represent them. To conclude, I hope DSA is able to give us our clothes back and to arm us to fight an equal and friendly battle with big platforms. We don't have to choose between consumer protection and innovation. We can actually have both in a well-balanced equilibrium. And if there is a place in our world where this balance can be achieved, is certainly in the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria, for linking also the two panels with artificial intelligence. And let me go to Iverna McCowan. She's from the Center for Democracy and Technology, Director Europe in the Europe office. And also we will continue on this line of arguments. What my question to you is, we see a lot of discussion on exactly this. There's an increasing trend to link the competition law arguments with the data protection challenges. What could be the effect for consumers from such a discussion that it is relevant in the DSA?
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you to PromethEUs for organizing this event. You know, I find this fascinating. I myself am a human rights lawyer, so the first question is often, you know, what are human rights lawyers doing in the Digital Services Act debate, which just goes to show the breadth of this package of legislation. And thank you very much to our colleague MEP who'd spoken previously. I think this analogy of the clothes is quite a powerful one. So indeed, and maybe to follow directly on from that point, is that there is a growing recognition that people who are accessing, you know, using various internet platforms themselves are uneasy at the extent to which that their privacy or data is being, you know, used, whether it's that you suddenly see an advertisement that's based on a very sensitive piece of information about you that you had not consented to use, or in different ways. So at the Center of Democracy and Technology, when we're looking at this from a human rights, in terms of the competition question, I think the competition question is a very valid one, and that's being touted by to say, unless users have a real choice in how their information and data will be used, then that's a competition problem. That's one line of argument. At the Center of Democracy and Technology, one of the points that we're looking at is a bit more in detail on the privacy side. So when you think about it, GDPR has been developed for individual rights. So it's very clear, I'm going to consent for a particular piece of information to be used. But the reality of the use of mass amounts of collective data coupled with artificial intelligence actually needs us to question is sophisticated enough to help users really guard those privacy and protection laws. So whilst I totally agree that there should be an element of how can we make sure that there's fairness in terms of sharing data, there's also a more fundamental question about what data should simply never be for sale, that's too sensitive and should not be used. And at the Center for Democracy and Technology, that's a question that we're really underlying and stressing in the overall DSA debate. Point that's also been raised, and this is again, it links a bit to user choice and whether competition law should be used or not, but we're also of course concerned about this whole question of individual user content. So when people post a piece of individual material online, would then the intermediaries be liable? And at the Center for Democracy and Technology, we're calling for a very strong legal framework and maintaining the limited liability for intermediaries. Some people would say, well, you know, why are human rights lawyers arguing that companies need to be protected by law? And the simple reason is, of course, as some of you will be aware, is that we need that legal clarity to ensure, on one hand, that companies are not tempted because of fear of a legal redress of overtaking down content and curbing freedom of expression. But we also don't want to say, you know, take a totally neutral approach and don't take anything against social harms, such as hate speech or disinformation online. So we do, I guess, to summarize the point from democratic principles, we're concerned to see how big data is being used to drive different advertising methods. And we think there's privacy concerns about that, remembering that this is also impacting elections. on the other side of the Atlantic at the moment. And we're also very keen on that individual user basis to say that we do need a very clear and stable liability framework in order to protect people's rights as they interact online. Thank you.
Thank you, Iverna. As I understand, because Ricardo wants to leave from the panel, I would. There is a question for him, but also this is a question that other panelists can also intervene. I would like to excuse from Ursula and Alex from a moment to ask Ricardo for this before he leaves. There's a question here that says that we have some lessons learned from the ex-ante regulation when we applied it to former telecom monopolies across Europe, and this allegedly has ensured over the years better prices and conditions for end users and more investments in networks. Are there lessons that we can learn from these telecom regulations that we can apply to these digital gatekeepers, Ricardo?
Well, I think that we are always on time to learn good lessons from the past, especially from the European acquis. But with all respect, I think that we are not talking about exactly the same kind of things. And when we try to talk about the same kind, look what is happening on the e-privacy discussion, which we've tried to get a common approach on the telecom and the OTTs. And the fact is that we are stuck for the last 3.5 years at least. What I would say is that, first of all, on the ex-ante part, on the competition part of the discussion, and I'm going directly to the question that has been raised, will we include all the digital services? Because we are talking about digital platforms, but what is a digital platform? What kind of digital platform are we talking about? This is the big question. Are we talking about, for example, just social media? Are we talking about, are we including search engines? Are we including cloud services? This is the first definition and the first kind of distinction that we should do. And afterwards, we will try to understand if there is a kind of opportunity and room to replicate some of what we've done and what we've achieved on the telecom side and try to replicate the good examples on this. And the second question, first definition, the scope. The second question is about the governance, which is also a very important issue, because we do have national regulatory authorities for the telecom. We do have also at the European level. We don't have anything similar on the European level for example, digital platforms. Should we build something on that direction? For example, in the Parliament, there are some opinions on that direction. In the Council, probably some. Or should we just move on, leaving to the cooperation between member states and enhance that kind of cooperation as the right solution? As you see, I think that we can learn, we should always learn, but we are not talking about exactly the same kind of things. And that kind of differences must be raised, and for sure the regulatory solutions must take into consideration the differences of what we are talking about. And sorry, I really must leave because I do have another call with my...
Thank you, Ricardo. We will continue this discussion, I think, later on with participants. And let's move on to Ursula Pachels, from the European Consumer Organizations. We follow again the arguments for the consumer and to see how the situation over there. And my question to Ursula would be, how can the DSA help consumers to be safe and well protected when they buy online from various platforms? And what are the key consumer issues maybe that the DSA needs to change regarding the role and the practices of platforms?
Thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction and good evening, everybody. I will try to answer that question, first of all, with focusing on a point that has already been mentioned, but it's really a key angle from a consumer perspective. So we think that the DSA really should have a strong focus on consumer protection and in particular on increasing the safety for online shoppers. So why is that a key priority from our perspective? Because in recent years, we have seen enormous amounts of dangerous and illegal products and services sold on platforms. So there is really ample evidence of that consumers are increasingly exposed to products that should not be on the European market, because we have clear standards, we have a very good safety regulatory framework, and unfortunately these platforms really open the door to traders who put products and services on the market that do not comply with these standards. And I have to underline that this is facilitated by the platforms. Just to give you an example, our member organizations, which are national consumer organizations, they do a lot of product testing. And they found in a recent exercise where they tested 250 products. So that was electronic goods, that was toys, cosmetics, car seats, etc. That two-thirds of the products were not compliant to safety rules. So that is really a very worrying situation. And it's not only worrying for consumers, it's not only difficult for enforcement authorities, it is also worrying for businesses who do their job properly. It's not good for a level playing field. It's not fair to the other market players who do their job properly. So to be clear, these practices are indeed enabled by the platforms. And we know that it's not only that they facilitate the selling, and that in our opinion, they do not care about the dangers that certain traders come with, but they even go and recruit traders, for example, in China or in other third countries, and push them to sell directly to European consumers. So I'm speaking about Amazon, Wish, eBay, etc. And they claim that they are mere intermediaries. Well, we think there is something to change in terms of the current situation, which indeed is that they are left off the hook in terms of checking, for example, compliance of these traders and of the products they offer, or checking also on the identity of traders and what they are selling. So what needs to be done, I think it's basically very simple. Platforms make a lot of money. We've seen that also in the COVID crisis. You know very well, the big winners of the crisis have been the big platforms, because people were increasingly dependent on online shopping. And we have seen also a big increase of fraud and scams during the COVID crisis on these platforms. So platforms make a lot of money from their intermediary activities, and they should hold accountable more than they are currently. So we need to fix the current issue. And I would like to come back to something which Ricardo just said, because that's a fundamental point for us. When the e-commerce directive was done 20 years ago, we didn't have so many variants of hosting platforms. Now we think that the online marketplaces are really a very specific category, and they should have a specific treatment in the DSA. I'm particularly referring to a specific liability regime. So in a nutshell, what we are advocating for is there should be clarification of what does it mean to be exempted from liability, except when you know certain things are illegal that are going on your platform, and you do not act expeditiously. So this is something which is not regulated in the platform. What are the consequences of that? What are the damages that you are then liable for if you don't do that? That is left to the member states. There is a very fragmented situation currently, and that is not good for consumer, and it is not good for businesses. We also think that if there is an economically dominant situation of a platform towards a trader, for example, is the platform who decides on the prices or who decides on the way the trader presents products or services, or on the way the reviews are done, then there should be also specific liability, a joint liability for the platform as well. The other point, just I'll be brief, is that we think it's time to introduce more knowledge of the platform about the users, about the professional users, about the commercial users they have on the platform. So the know your business user principle is very important. Our members again have done tests, and it's extremely easy to list products on a platform that have already been identified by authorities as illegal. Our members have done that. They have listed things. It was very easy. Nobody checked whether this is lawful or not. So we need more identity controls. And we also think, last point, that there should be random checks on what is going on the platform that online marketplaces should do. And just to be clear, I'm talking about online marketplaces, and I'm not saying that we should change this current regime of Article 15 in the e-commerce directive, which is that there is no obligation to monitor, no general obligation to monitor. We think that should stay, but we should have a specific liability for online marketplaces to do random checks. So what, to conclude, we expect is actually what Ursula von der Leyen and Mr. Viola said it in the beginning, referring to her priorities. What she said in her political priorities is that with the DSA, the Commission wants to upgrade the liability and safety rules for digital platforms and services and products, and so to complete the digital single market. That's exactly what we expect. And I would like to also say that we think that the European Parliament is doing a great job, and in particular the IMCO committee. I would like to thank the MEPs who are in this panel also for their really good work on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ursula. And now Alex will answer to all these questions that were raised. He's the last one. He takes on the floor, and a lot of questions there. Alex, well, my question, of course, I guess the discussion is very vivid, so new things come up. Do you feel that this, the DSA, with this new DSA, consumers feel more protected and well informed about the data users or sharing with third parties, or you think that we need more regulation in this?
So first of all, thanks for this timely event, and thanks for all the participants and all the panel speakers who gave a very good insight, and we had a very good discussion today. I was also following the AI part. It was really interesting. First of all, as you already, and I'm seeing also from the participants list, a number of stakeholders who I have met during the past months. Next week it will be a very important week in Parliament for the DSA process, whereby next Monday we will have a discussion on the 3 reports, IMCO, URI, and LIBE, and then on Tuesday we will be having our final vote. So it's basically we're going to conclude next week the practically whole year of discussions with different stakeholders, discussions within the Internal Market Committee and the other respective committees, and also a very long and very difficult political and technical negotiations that we had during the past months. I believe that, and I can speak on behalf of the Internal Market Committee, next Monday and next Tuesday we will be discussing and voting in the plenary on a very progressive and and I link it with your remark, very consumer-oriented report. The IMCO report, first of all, is divided into 2 different parts. First of all, we are tackling the revision of the e-commerce directive, 20-year-old directive, which has parts which are still relevant, but other parts needs upgrading. And on the other hand, we are dealing with the internal market instrument, dealing with the systemic operators which have a gatekeeper role in the digital ecosystem. The IMCO report also sets the internal market and consumer protection priorities on how digital services, including online platforms, marketplaces, should be regulated in the future, and how the Commission should address and tackle the current shortcomings in the online environment in this DSA package. During the IMCO negotiations, we have had a common understanding that, first of all, the Digital Services Act is not a threat to competition and innovation, but an opportunity to provide a better and also a safer environment to users, consumers, and also to companies in the EU. The IMCO report recognizes, therefore, that a unique, holistic, common approach built on trust, built on choice, built on high level of consumer protection, fully integrating users, fully integrating consumers, and also integrating our SMEs concerns is urgently needed. There are, as I said, 3 different reports, and the differences of the IMCO report is that we are dealing with these 2 instruments, the revision of the e-commerce and the ex-ante instrument, and I'm going to basically outline the basic ideas that we will be discussing next Monday and voting upon next Tuesday. The IMCO report aims to regulate digital services, including online platforms and marketplaces, by creating a digital environment, as I said, built on trust, choice, and also a high level of protection. Search engines like Google and social media platforms, also like Facebook, or online marketplaces like Amazon and eBay, are increasingly playing a central role in everyone's life. Platform economy is becoming a key instrument in bringing people and also businesses together. They help facilitate social and commercial exchanges of goods, services, and information, which would otherwise not have happened, especially during the times that we are living right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, whereby this digital infrastructure and these digital services basically have been of fundamental importance to continue to live our lives as normally as possible. Shopping, connecting with friends and family, sharing experiences, watching a movie, listening to music, reading a book, booking a trip. You can just name any kind of activity from our everyday life and from one of these activities, and there is a multiple number of online platforms and facilities that basically provide for these services. So basically, digital services are all around us. Why we need to change it, some might argue. The reason is that when the e-commerce directive was adopted basically 20 years ago, platforms like Google, like Amazon, like Booking.com were at their very infancies, while other players such as Facebook, Shopify, Etsy, Instagram didn't even exist. Online platforms and digital services have largely evolved during the past 20 years when basically the e-commerce directive came into effect. The current framework of rules need to catch up basically with the new realities that our users, our consumers, our industries are facing, and the need to ensure that public interests, fundamental rights, and also users and consumers' rights are protected in these new digital realities that we are living. The IMCO recommendations touch upon a wide range of issues, including, first of all, obligations related to transparency and also information for online marketplaces. And when it comes to online marketplaces, we are dedicating a whole chapter dealing with online marketplaces and a number of issues that our consumers are facing. And here we are trying to implement the fundamental principle, the fundamental pillar upon which the report is being built upon, that we are trying to create a level playing field between the online and the offline world. Basically, the principle of what is considered to be illegal offline should also be considered to be illegal online, and also giving the same level of consumer protection for those consumers who buy their products, their services by using the digital means. They should and must have the same level of protection as those consumers who make the purchases in the offline world, basically. We are also dealing with product safety, again, by introducing a number of innovative concepts, effective enforcement and supervision measures, because it's basically useless to move forward these recommendations without having. And I think that this was one of the biggest shortcomings of the current e-commerce framework that we have, whereby elements of supervision, cooperation, and enforcement were totally inexistent. We are moving forward ideas on fines containing the spread of illegal content online, artificial intelligence, ex-ante regulation to prevent also market failures by big platform. For the very first time, we are also introducing, and again, I'm linking this argumentation on how our proposals are going to protect more our consumers. And one of the principles, fundamental principles that we are moving forward is the know your business customer principle, special responsibilities for online marketplaces to guarantee the safety of our consumers, stricter rules on targeted advertisement and AI mechanisms, and also a scope. And here, I think this was one of our biggest wins during the negotiations, extending the scope of the DSA extraterritoriality to also catch those companies which are established in third countries, companies which are targeting directly our consumers, our users, companies which are basically at a competitive advantage also when compared to EU companies, which have to abide by a very extensive set of regulations, technical regulations, health and safety regulations. And we want, again, to move forward these recommendations to have basically a level playing field between the responsibilities that these third country sellers, these third country companies targeting our consumers have to shoulder, and also the responsibilities that our producers, our SMEs, our startups, our companies have to abide with to basically market their products within our internal market. More specifically, we have again asked for the implementation of the principle of what is illegal offline should also be illegal online, as well as the principles, again, which are of fundamental importance throughout our report and are constantly mentioned. Of high
conclude a little bit, Alex, because we ran a little bit out of time. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to conclude, and also these principles should be guiding principles in the e-commerce framework. Last point, we have also introduced measures to protect people and European companies from online harmful business models, and we are targeting specifically these harmful business models, manipulation, discriminatory practices, models, which are basically designed to maximize the amount of user attention dedicated to the platform based on the generation of more traffic, more clicks, to quickly amplify illegal or sensationalist content. The DSA package is key, and we should ensure that the Act comes into place, first of all, to protect our citizens and consumers, secondly, to provide a better and safer digital environment, and thirdly, it will also finally define real, tangible rules in a virtual world with no borders that so far has only been dictated, these rules, only by big tech.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex, for covering all the aspects. Now, we ran a little bit out of time, but I see that Roberto Licia from Netcom wants to make a comment. Roberto, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, I try to be very short because most of the things have been already covered, and I thank you a lot for all the topics that has been discussed. I am a whole guy of the e-commerce directive because I've been working on the implementation and the enforcement of the directive, the e-commerce directive 2000s in Italy. And I've seen all the evolution that happened in 20 years. So I do agree that many things have happened since in the platform economy, in what has been the evolution of the market and the access to the market by small sellers, by small companies, and by the shoppers. And I must say that I think that DSA has to be implemented very rapidly because we are in the right moment because things have been have changed a lot since. What I see that is very important is to adopt a future-proof approach because the e-commerce directive has been enforced in many different ways in the different countries. So that has been a limitation for the small companies, for the SMI, to compete in the different market in Europe. So I think that is very important that the regulation should be very well done and foolproof. But also, I think that is very important to ensure consistency with the other legislation, because the difficulty is to put everything in the same basket. For instance, the online advertising should not be in, but should be addressed with other instruments. I think that we have to be very careful not to try to put all the issues in the same basket when often we have other legislation and other instruments that can give the right answer. I think that is very important that, as this has been said, regarding the maintain the country of origin principle, which is a key element in that scenario. And I think also that has been addressed by many of the intervenants in that panel, that we should have a level playing field for the non-compliant products that are entering into Europe. And I think this is a big concern by the small enterprise. But also we have to consider that many small companies or medium companies are becoming marketplace. So we have to be very careful to address a specific chapter to marketplace, because marketplace, at least we have today in Europe between 50 and 100 marketplace already working. And I don't think that we should put some many more limitation to the marketplace, considering that we can work on the regulation that is also existing for the product safety, compliance and responsibility for unsafe goods, by the fact that the market surveillance regulation prohibits since 60 July 21 the placing on the market of goods that are not safe. So we have other tools that can be enforced to guarantee the shoppers that we don't have products unsafe that are put into the market. Because I think that is very important to have a level playing field, but also is very important to grant the company that wanted to grow not to have, how can I say, useless cost and useless activity that give a concern to the European companies compared to what the big companies are already doing. So I don't think that we should create fences around the growth of European marketplace, but we should put concerns and fences and control on the products that are put into the market. So I would make a big distinction between what the company do and what the product has to be controlled when it is put into the market. And we have many instruments that can grant the shoppers that is not happening, giving a certain guarantee also to the market that there is a level playing field to compete into the market, to make a European company to grow and also to grow in a competitive environment, also abroad, not only in Europe, but also in the other continent. So I think that we have to keep in mind that we have to compete with the other continental blocks.
Thank you, Roberto. I'm afraid we do not have time for follow-ups. We have two members of the parliament waiting also for concluding remarks. So I would go directly to Stefano to introduce.
Yeah. Thanks, Angelos, and thanks to all the panelists, and thanks also to Brando Benifei and Eva Kaili for waiting for. We are sorry we are a little bit late, and we are pleased to ask them to make their remarks. Of course, Brando Benifei is a member of the new commission, the new committee on the special committee on artificial intelligence, and while Eva Kaili is a member of several committees, ITRE, Econ, and Budge, but especially here also because she's the chair of the panel for the future of science and technology, STOA. So thanks again to both of you for being with us, and I give the floor to, I start with Brando Benifei. Please, Brando.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to this debate. Thanks to ICOM for a continuing effort to bring up useful discussions, bringing together different stakeholders and the lawmakers on different digital issues. I think it's a valuable support to our debates, and so I want to thank ICOM for this work. This debate comes, I would say, at a perfect timing, since as it's been said, we will discuss and vote on these important files in plenary next week. And as you said, we are starting our work in the IDA committee on the Digital Services Act and on the artificial intelligence. The Parliament, we can say, is resuming its efforts after many months when we were occupied mainly by the reaction to the pandemic crisis. But now, on the big digital ambitions that we had before the pandemic has started, we are now resuming and trying to speed up our work. On both issues, we need to have a holistic approach given all the stakes involved. This is why the Parliament will vote on 3 different reports on DSA, exploring the issue from different angles. Not only from the internal market perspective. I saw you had Alex talking, who has done a great job. We work together in a very smooth and I would say very effective way. Focusing more directly in this aspect on online marketplaces and ex-ante provisions for gatekeepers. But then also we will vote on the juridical contractual law angle, dealing with content management and dispute settlement mechanisms. And also from a fundamental rights angle, which is also paramount in terms of importance. Think, for example, on micro-targeting of users, privacy issues, but also issues with freedom of expression. The key messages are all the same. What is illegal offline is illegal online. Harmful content should be treated in a different way than illegal. Compliance with milestone legislation such as the GDPR, no general monitoring obligation, and preservation of the liability exemption and country of origin principles set by the e-commerce directive. This is some of the points on the table. And on AI, the work has gone even further. We will vote on ethical aspects of AI, liability, and intellectual property rights. 3 of the most pressing issues on AI and the ones requiring more legal certainty for all the developers. But it is a work that has been involving almost all committees, given the horizontal implications and applications of AI, which is why we are now aiming to enlarge our view within the IDA committee to build on the existing work and even include other less explored angles that still have great implications. Think, for example, about the skills aspect, international cooperation and trade, environment, gender equality, etc. I'm honored to be able to work as shadow rapporteur for my group on the final outcome of this special committee. You mentioned several times in your background note to this debate the risk of stifling innovation and competition. The aim of our parliamentary positions is taking this worry into account, is working in the opposite way. We aim to strike a balance between seizing the incredible opportunities stemming from AI and the internet with the risks that are there and can also be very high, both for privacy and safety of our citizens, as well as for our very society and democracies at large. Regulation does not necessarily hamper innovation if it is well done. Rather, it can provide guidance and legal certainty, harmonize some aspects to avoid fragmentation, and establish red lines that must not be crossed. After all, as the white paper itself states, trust is a key element for a successful uptake of new technologies. And actually, we are considering SMEs and startups in both AI and DSA files working, for example, on access to data, limiting additional burdens, etc. I believe we are in line with the data strategy, with the SME strategy and the other Commission proposals on this. We always hear observers commenting that Europe lags behind on digitalization and AI, but our aim is not necessarily to create just a new Google or to climb the top 5 tech companies. Our aim is, first of all, to establish a model that is compatible with our fundamental values and also a standard for excellence and trust that can be replicated in the whole world. We have seen that the EU was able to do this in other moments and on other aspects, also from the digital side. That is the EU added value for AI, a so-called human-centric AI, and for online platforms. A model that benefits people and society, not only profit for the few. Moreover, we are dealing with 2 different kinds of situations. The SA is intervening on already existing ad hoc legislation and tackling issues that emerge in the meantime, while the work we are doing on AI is exploring possibilities to provide a framework and well-established principles to a technology on which the uptake is only at its beginning, which makes it harder to even fully appreciate all the consequences. So we need to be prudent. In any case, I believe that we will need to work together to cooperate among institutions, civil society, private sector, social partners in order to achieve the best possible standards. Naturally, to conclude, legislation will need to go together with increased investments in infrastructure for connectivity, on skills, etc. This is why resources are a key factor for a successful and fair digital transition. I was happy to read that after proposing cuts on some key programs of the MFF in this sense, even the Council conclusions of 2 weeks ago called for at least 20% of the funds under the Recovery and Resilience Facility to be made available for the digital transition. We will continue fighting for a better MFF, but this gives us some hope for a good outcome of negotiations that are able to match our ambition in this sense, because otherwise we say a lot, but then we don't do enough to be able to reach our goals and our idea of a European Union that is able to be a champion for digital services and AI in the new generation. Also taking into account all the technological changes that are happening at a great speed that need European institutions to be able to react with the same speed and give solutions that are not obsolete when they are approved. So it's a difficult work, but I'm sure that working together we can achieve the right objectives. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Brando. Before giving the final take to Eva Kaili, just to remind you, Mirella Liuzzi, the Italian Undersecretary of State, unfortunately she was in an urgent meeting for the Italian budget that is now will be presented in the next couple of days, and she sent us a message. Of course, you would find it on our website, PromethEUs website. Please, Eva.
Thank you so much, and actually thank you for basically initiating and launching this collaboration under PromethEUs. I think my colleagues covered most of the activities we have in the European Parliament, so I'll try to be a bit more general. We have like 4 big files waiting to work on the next year. It's the data strategy, artificial intelligence, ethics by law, so by legislation. Then we have digital finance and the industrial strategy. I think the pandemic gave us a different prism and accelerated everything. So I'm very happy because I'm working with colleagues like Brando and Alex actually to achieve something that we were dealing with before the pandemic, but now everybody sees things under the same perspective. So what I would like basically to underline is that we still have shortcomings in terms of achieving a digital single market. We are a huge market as EU, but the problem of not having unicorns is that we have not yet removed all the barriers. We saw that during the pandemic. We saw that in Italy, we couldn't have the supply chain functioning properly to receive medical equipment that was stuck in Germany. And these are barriers that if we don't remove, then everything we want to achieve will not be possible, especially under the next wave of this pandemic. So we need to have harmonization. It's really important. If we have these rules, we are actually a super strong market. And the leverage we have is also the access to public data. So what Europe is trying to achieve is like to make sure we're going to prepare the data governance of high risk and low risk sectors in order to speed up with the low risk. We will completely respect fundamental human rights in the digital era of the high risk. So this is essential because we don't just want to compete with China or US, we want to compete under our lead with quality and respect of human rights. And this is especially safety and privacy. There are social and legal challenges that we have to translate to the digital era. But this is a task we are ready to take. I think we have the AIDA, we are working there. We have the intergroups of AI, and I've set up a Center for Artificial Intelligence under the Science and Technology Committee, which actually will try to prepare also data standards. So one of the problems we had, I give you an example, I think it's more important than anything else. The ECDC, the European Center for Disease Control and Prevention, gathered data for the pandemic and had access to 80% of data across the EU member states. The problem was like these were random data from media, from hospitals, from authorities, but they didn't have the same standards, so they were very difficult to be useful. Imagine if all the scientists had access to the European data to understand the pattern of the disease, to understand all the methods, how faster they would reach into a treatment, or at least an understanding of how to handle this. So it's really important to work on the governance, create the standards, and influence globally other countries like China and US to use this data, especially democracies, I would say, because we don't want to see social ranking like we see in China of citizens because of a pandemic. And we don't want to see the industry leading the way. We want to see a world where quality of life is what we want to achieve with AI, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, with digital finance. And finally, in order to become like competitive, we also have to make sure that SMEs and startups will have access to good quality of data. So we have to finish with all these files in order to manage to give them access to those under the GDPR, but also the new regulations. And then, of course, be ready to support them with training when they need and mentoring, create ecosystems. We do that now, for example, in Greece. Angelos is there to have the digital innovation hub standards, basically creating ecosystems to mentor SMEs to be new tools that we have now, the new exponential technologies. And we saw that we could actually be well prepared for this pandemic, but we were not. We are all suddenly teleworking. We're using teleconferences for education reasons, and we don't have to travel in order to meet and exchange opinions. So I think in order to be prepared, we have to use what we have, remove the barriers of regulation, have a very strong ethical and legislative framework, have good quality of data governance and architecture, and make sure that we will give the proper access and skills for everybody to take advantage of those. Finally, trying to work with Center for AI, I'm trying to collaborate, and this means we try to also impact and influence other countries by following our lead. So this is a huge responsibility
and using the strength and the power of the European market to, it's called basically to achieve reciprocity. It's a very strong leverage we have. So in order to allow them access to the EU infrastructures, we have also to make them follow and support the human rights and the fundamental values of EU. So these are the things that I would like to underline. There is we will heavily fund new projects, artificial intelligence, supercomputers, because if you don't have the capacity to deal with all this data, it doesn't still make sense. And we already invest in microprocessors. We want to invest in quantum computing. Again, for the same reason, we need to have cybersecurity. So we care a lot about safety. And Brandon mentioned trust. To have trust and to have citizens use these technologies, we need to prepare our infrastructures to be safe from any quantum development in other countries, because instantly you would have solution for any cryptography once somebody achieves results. So Europe cannot be left behind. We exceed in excellence, research and development. What we don't have yet, it's an open market where people could and startups could stay here and scale up in Europe. But we know where we want to go and we're working on that. So hopefully next time we will meet, we will have a good news and a very strong market. We're already on the top 3 globally. And that's about it. So thank you for supporting us and for creating like forums to discuss about the developments. And I think also the southern countries, we have a different maybe approach and understanding of working stronger together. So I think this is also one of the leverage we have inside Europe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eva, and thanks, of course, to Brando, and thanks to my fellow members of PromethEUs, Oscar and Angelos. And I mean, we would find all the materials on our website, and we will give you notice of our future events quite soon, I believe. So thanks to everybody, also for the patience. I mean, after almost 3 hours. Thanks a lot.